Welcome back to EOSIO Phoenix Communities. I want to thank you guys for tuning in to our channel. This topic is going to be on our drafted framework for developing our distribution applications within our community, and also sharing some details on how people who are interested can get involved. As some of you guys know, we've been holding bi-weekly meetings to introduce EOS.io to the community, as well as hosting some general software gatherings to understand how to get your machine set up to run a local testnet setup for DAP development. This presentation is going to go a little bit deeper into what at least I envision would be required for developing a project on EOS.io across the community. So, I mean, there's different types of projects. This presentation is more intended for, I guess, larger scale type projects like your ride shares type projects, maybe an Airbnb type distribution application, systems that reinvent the legacy applications we have today, and how we can get buy-in from our community. And when I say our community, I'm not just speaking about the users within EOS.io, like our community ecosystem across the globe, but I'm also talking about our partners, or our distribution application partners all around the world, and maybe coming up working with other communities to develop a general framework on how we can leverage different skill sets, leverage even different perspectives, so that when we start to push out these distribution applications on a global scale, we have local buy-in from all these communities to help market it, to help promote it, to help ensure that it's built to incorporate maybe the requirements that are needed in that setting. And it's not to say that there couldn't be some applications that are tailored only specific to a region, but again, this presentation is geared more towards those global type applications that we might be able to build together. So a lot of people who are watching this may actually just be asking themselves, well, why would I want to participate in any of these communities anyway? In fact, I've already given my money to EOS.io. They have their war chest, and I can basically just sit back and make a lot of money. Well, in fact, from my perspective, the best opportunity actually within EOS.io is getting involved in the community itself, because the involvement and your value within EOS.io, contrary to I think what most people think, is a lot of it will be driven upon reputation and governance, both on the level of EOS.io as a global community, but also the local communities that are creating value. And in fact, that's where this technology, in my opinion, is going. But we're going to go through the general motivating factors for why someone would want to maybe help in these efforts. And for each person, it's going to be a little bit different. There's no one reason for everyone, and some people may in fact have several. So I put together this slide deck because I think it characterizes the different motivations I'm at least working through. And going through the different phases of this project, I felt different elements of this as I learned more about EOS.io. I'm going to explain that to you guys in a little bit of detail. I'm going to step through this a little bit. So what you're seeing on the left side here is this framework by which people are basically motivated to do something. For some people, for example, it could just be a sense of calling or meaning in their life, right? So they're attracted to something like EOS because they, in their mind, and I'm basically one of them, believe that EOS represents a alternative I'd like to see built in our society. The way I envision, today's world is it's a game. So every time you go to work, or every time you go to a business and support it, you are actually signing a social contract with that business or that job, right? And every day we make the choice to support those jobs or those businesses in some way, right? Because we need goods and services and we make transactions with them. So really we could be exchanging our time, our energy, maybe we're giving them money in exchange for something, but ultimately we are making some type of transaction with them. And there is a cost to that, whether it's monetary or some other form of cost from us. And so EOS, something like EOS, may force people who have studied it to maybe reconsider, the meaning in what they're doing and how this entire human exchange of energy, emotion, and value, right, and expertise could be done. So that, to me, is a calling. It's a meaning. But there could be other forms as well. So for some people, and I've seen this even in some of the BP teams, for them it's more of a technical, understanding the technical challenges with implementing something like this from a technology perspective. So you have a lot of multiple aspects of deploying a technology, and there's a sense of accomplishment and mastery in doing that. And not only that, I would say that because the world is going in this way, and we see in some regions, in fact, the populations are more advanced and geared towards aligning themselves with this technology, they also see it as a way to improve themselves, because in designing these businesses and solutions, it's just going to unlock more opportunities in the future to join more teams to develop these systems. This is basically going to be the future. So in that sense, a sense of accomplishment and mastery can go a long way to further someone's career even, or open up other opportunities that they would have never had. Now, working our way through this list, you also have obviously a sense of ownership, and this comes from the perspective of creating something of value. So you can take, for the first time in really human history, and this is a little bit different than Bitcoin, because with Bitcoin it was I would say a passive, a passive action by somebody, right, to take on Bitcoin, hold it in their wallets, and the idea was it would provide an alternative to the existing banking solutions or options that are out there in terms of fiat currencies. With EOS.io and maybe others that follow it, what you're actually seeing is a decentralized way to actually create value from essentially ideas themselves and from communities. So these aspects, both an idea and a community and a reputation, those things now actually have value. And so people can be motivated solely or in addition to these other components I'm going to discuss to obtain more value, more ownership, more control in their community, more influence, I would say, is probably a more appropriate term. Because the risk would be if you decide not to, and you're passive in kind of having a Bitcoin approach to this project, other people will decide it for you how the community will be structured. And that applies both to the local communities, as well as any app that's built, as well as the EOS global governance system. So that's why it's so important to have local boots on the ground, people who are involved in this, to help shape the way these communities are formed, because it's going to potentially establish the basis for many more things to come in the future. The other aspects to it would be scarcity. So why do you want to participate in the EOS.io local startup community? Well, one reason would be the knowledge that the people have there may be something you can't find anywhere else. And a good example of that is just blockchain technologies in general. And some of the information you can get from videos of people who have been around for many years studying this technology. Some people invest 30 to 40 hours a week, if you can imagine that, studying these different technologies, the advantages and disadvantages to them, and lessons learned along the way that they've seen with other teams, developing distributed applications. So it may be an an incentive to participate locally, because it would be very hard to get this information either through a YouTube video like this or through just doing it on your own. Now, it's not to say you couldn't learn those things, but it's a lot harder to seek that information and gain it in a rapid fashion so that you can take your idea and bring it to market fast. The other topic we have here, or the other area, would be avoidance. So this comes from a notion, and I think you will see this eventually, but it comes from the dynamics of the market. So now that we have EOS.io, the cat is out of the bag, and maybe not to everybody the cat's not out of the bag. A lot of people are still looking at EOS.io as just another form of an investment. But in fact, it can be, and it will be, in my opinion, a game changer for disrupting legacy businesses. And the risk would be people who don't get involved in this technology. It will be a very similar strategy to how Blockbuster viewed the internet, right? When the internet came along, the businesses that ignored the new business models, they found themselves out of business. And as individuals, my prediction is that people who choose not to study and understand these technologies, they'll find themselves in maybe positions that could have been avoided just by understanding the technology. And it's, this technology is going to make things more efficient. It's going to enable more automation, more, lowering of the barrier for so many different things, removing the barrier, I should say, of so many different things, that people who are now intermediaries in those businesses could be displaced in the roles they have today. So it's going to be very important for people who are in those roles, and it's virtually everybody, because it's basically it's reinventing the entire framework of how society works to get some knowledge in this so that they can, I guess, if you will, sell themselves or market themselves in a different way to distributed teams who are developing these solutions. The other one is social influence. So right now, at least in Phoenix, again, it's very hard to find people who are actually studying these technologies. There's a lot of people who are speculating on the technology, but there's not a lot of people who are studying the technology and understanding how to apply it. So you can find people who are studying this technology, connect with them, and potentially even start a new venture or business, because it's you're basically working in a community of like-minded people who are at least aware of this these platforms, and that could be very valuable as well. The other aspect of it is you don't know actually who you might find at that meetup group. You could have VCs that attend, some of these meetup groups. The person next to you could potentially be a VC. And the reason why I mention that is because this entire EOS.io model enables that type of possibility, if you will. The ability to get funding is bizarre world. In a good way, I mean that by. But there's multiple ways to get funding and buy-in, and community influence is a big part of that. So that would be another reason why you'd want to participate in one of these. So I hope I kind of answered some of the different aspects, motivating factors for why someone would want to be involved. But at least those are the ones that I was working through as I was kind of thinking about this. So let's talk about the different roles in the community for developing these distributed applications. EOS Phoenix is actually, in my opinion, taking a little bit of a different approach with developing these distributed applications. So you see most teams working through like already established smaller players and then releasing their DAP, if you will, across the global community, or maybe they have a source of funding. The way we were thinking about doing this is more like an incubation location where people can come in and understand the general framework of these ideas, churn out these DAP prototypes and concepts, relatively quickly to the community and see where there's resources and buy-in to support them in getting these to market very fast in a very rapid fashion. Now, to do that, there's many different roles that are available to you guys, and I wanted to make this slide deck to kind of clear the fog, if you will, because I think when most people think about cryptocurrencies, they think about developers. And while developers are an important component of cryptocurrencies and distributed applications, I'm maybe a minority here because I know a lot of other communities I heard that are building on EOS are emphasizing developers, but a lot of this is also going to be other skill sets that are needed. So I'm going to go through those today, guys, and if you have any questions, I'd say hit us up in our Telegram chat, EOS Phoenix, or I would encourage you guys to stop by our next meetup to find out more about how we're going to roll some of this information out, some of the templates that we have available. We have like green screens we're going to have set up so people can go through their pitch decks and just basically churn these out in a very rapid fashion. The idea is that maybe 70, 80, 90% of them may actually not yield anything, but you're essentially helping the community bring an idea to market and rallying support to share that globally and potentially make partnerships with other communities around the globe to rapidly deploy these and get buy-in from not only the developer community but the entire global world. Because EOS and the entire crypto community, in fact, we need to identify that killer DAP. And there's incentives in doing this. There's tremendous incentives. So incentives is not an issue here. For anybody that participates in these, in my opinion, we can develop the framework to enable these collaborative efforts to occur. So the first slide deck I have here has nothing to do with developers. It has to do with the look of a application. When someone opens up an application, what are the different storyboards? What are the different things that they may see, right, in this app? How's it actually, from a, visualization standpoint, going to look and feel? And how's it going to actually work so that someone who has no knowledge potentially of cryptocurrencies even, they would be able to use this very easily? That's what we're getting after it in EOS Phoenix. I think that's a little bit different than, again, some others potentially, because we're starting from the just other roles that we think may be helpful. And as we develop more of those roles in the community, it'll allow us to get projects out faster because they'll develop an expertise for it. So this is one of them, which would be prototyping, in which you maybe draw out your interface, the way it will look. Maybe you have a storyboard and you go through the different use cases and you share that with the community. Maybe we develop props for the hardware because we don't have the hardware developed yet. But again, just the idea alone will enable us to help refine the ideas, and it will also allow you to get feedback from the community. As you share these, you're going to get feedback, you're going to get questions from people, and it also potentially get buy-in and interest from them. So that's a role that is pretty critical in the community. And someone who is a creative type, someone who likes sketching and drawing, and who can think of the different scenarios, that could be a huge role for somebody. And it doesn't necessarily need to come in play with your initial idea. You can maybe come in and partner with someone who's very skilled at prototyping and connect with them. So this would actually be a role in the community, and there could be huge incentives to help do this, because illustrations and ideas alone, infographics and things like that, can drive a lot of interest in a project, can drive a lot of support in a project. You'd be very surprised. And so art has in my opinion, a huge influence on just garnering more energy from the community. And as you know, energy and emotion investment in a project is a huge thing. I mean, just look at EOS. That was a big part of it, guys. So let's not make let's make no mistakes here. This is a huge role. So if you have an interest in that, again, come to the meetup group, find out a little bit more, maybe help us even develop some of these templates, because we're interested in kind of generating a framework for others to also use and strengthen the community as a whole. And not just EOS Phoenix, but others all across the globe. So this one might surprise some people, but DAP development roles also include game designers, right? So a lot of people might laugh about this slide and think it's ridiculous, but in fact, roles in the community for game designers are going to be huge. And the reason why I say that, and it might strike you as odd, is because what we're really inventing here, guys, when we're developing these DAPs, whether in Phoenix or for our global friends all around the world, we're developing a new game. Basically, we're developing new games. That's right, guys, new games. And again, I'll go back to the example of my own life. Every day I get up and I am interacting for work, or I'm going to make a purchase, I am participating in a smart contract. In a sense, the smart contract isn't on the blockchain, but I am basically adhering to a social contract between myself and maybe a group of parties, or myself and an institution. And essentially what EOS is trying to do, for those maybe that haven't figured it out, is they are essentially developing new games to reinvent those systems. What's going on? You can't be me. Yeah, lots going on in the Phoenix area. I'd like to, connect with you. If you're here in the Phoenix area, please feel free to, visit us and find out more. And thanks for tuning in, by the way. I just saw your messages. But game designers are an important role for our communities, because really what we're doing is we're making new games to reward people in different ways for creating value, right, into systems. So whether you're a driver for Uber today, we have a role for you in developing a new ride-sharing project, right? That could be totally a useful person to come up with how we design this new game. If you're a gamer and you love games, there's a role for you, because really what you're doing when you play a game is you're interacting with a reward incentive framework or feedback mechanism. And the games that we're going to deploy on EOS are very similar. The difference is that the roles for the games we're deploying are in the real world. There are things like giving someone an opportunity to start their business, maybe to start their ride-sharing business. It could be renting out their land. It could be helping farmers. It could be a lot of things. It could be in healthcare. It could be in insurance. It could be in a coffee shop. I mean, these could even be what some people might view as simple things, but they're really huge things when you're deploying these globally. It could be reward mechanisms to incentivize businesses to basically on-ramp into crypto, which is a huge thing, right? How we're going to on-ramp. You can have the best technology, but if you don't have the right reward and incentive systems to enable marketers and other people in your community to basically try out your technology, the technology is not going to be successful. So game designers are a very important role in our community. So again, the main thing I'm really interested in as a first step as a game designer is working with others to develop a reward incentive framework to basically empower anybody in the community to show up, network, learn, develop, test, and deploy. Okay, if they're participating in that, how do we put together a framework that incentivizes them to? But also, how do we enable accountability? And that's something I ran into And I'm going to make a different video about this, but even in like my BP team, as you guys know, that's on hold right now. But, one of the valuable lessons I learned is, working with a team and having a social contract of accountability and, some incentives so that those that are interested in working on the project and are consistent and show up and genuinely want to learn, those folks we want rewarded. What we don't want to do is we don't want to have a system in place where ideas are generated, there's work to be done or resources that are needed, right, to implement a project on a global scale. And, the 80% maybe, or however many percent of the people who don't want to do any DAP development, get just free, like rewarded outright. I'm not saying there wouldn't be any airdrops, but what I'm saying is we need to make sure that there's accountability in the community to empower people to actually allocate their time to help these projects move along. So there needs to be that form of it. There also needs to be accountability. So if someone says they're going to do something and they don't do it, how as a community, how do we handle that? How do we make sure there's accountability? So very interesting stuff. I'm sure no one has actually even talked about that component because, again, most of these projects for now are building their systems on smaller teams, which I'm not saying that wouldn't be the case in EOS Phoenix, but still you're going to have these aspects within even those smaller teams. Keeping accountability and having people be rewarded for their work is going to be important. So that brings us to other components of building a DAP. So again, we haven't even gone to the developers, but another important aspect of developing a distribution application is how do we create a price discovery mechanism and create liquidity for incubator projects on a global scale. Now, for those that don't know, Bancor has issued this white paper, and they have one method for price discovery, which is this, they call it this constant reserve ratio. And so it works very much like in the old days how the United States, the US dollars were backed by gold, right? And you could redeem that dollar supposedly for some gold, right? Well, this price discovery mechanism could work in a similar way, although the constant reserve ratio as a percentage could vary between projects. But this is something, if Bancor or maybe others create this through a DEX, a smart contract, that may be a way that, there's a mechanism to create basically automatic liquidity for the incubator projects that are done. Because remember, you're going to have hundreds or thousands of these, and creating liquidity for them is going to be very key, because what you don't want to happen is airdropping these tokens on your community or across all of EOS, and then come to find out that everybody is, there's issues using this as a utility because the price, there's no liquidity for them, and the price just fluctuates very rapidly. Now, this doesn't take care of all the aspects of it, so there's probably more work to do here, but it's a very interesting concept, and I recommend anybody who has an interest in token economics or price discovery mechanisms, this could be a role for you in terms of helping the community solve some of these problems. I wouldn't even call them problems; they're just challenges, because I think we'll get over this. But it is a very interesting problem, because at some point, when you have thousands of these things, there would need to be some type of framework, some general framework by which you have both local and global price discovery mechanisms for these DAP tokens. And then I mentioned in the past, and I'm going to mention again, community governance, right? So we talked about this a little bit in the gaming slide section, but I'm going to just mention it again, which is this community governance of ensuring that we have some type of expectations for the community members. And the reason why we want to have that is to ensure that we're basically growing and building towards our goals to, provide value across the world. And the only way we can do that is to make sure that we have structures in place to enable and incentivize people to help the community. And what we don't want is people to, I think, not adhere to the rules or violate some type of policies, take advantage of others. Those would be things that, again, through the social contracts, we could establish some method of arbitration to ensure that we have sustainability and, basically equality in the community. So this is going to be important, but I recommend those that are interested, Eleanor Ostrom's book has her principles for governing commons. And I'm going to go over this in more detail because it also has some impact and weight within the EOS.io governance structure as well. But it's going to be very critically important to have a governance structure, even locally, because again, we want to make sure that there's an understanding in place about if someone says they intend to do something, then there's a reward for that effort, but there's also, accountability or reputation hits if, someone says they do something, they're going to do something and they don't. I mean, it's just like in real life. If you, told your boss, or you told your, family you were going to do something and then you don't do it, well, over time, people are going to, I think twice if you mention you're going to do something. They may not really trust you, right? So it has an impact to your trust, which again goes back to the value of what your personal EOS.io would be in a community. It all goes back to trust. So community governance is going to be extremely important, which is, in my opinion, being very overlooked at this point by others who aren't as knowledgeable or don't listen to some of the sections in EOS Governance or listen to Fuzzy's videos. But this is going to be an important component of how we shape things, at least if we want these systems to work better than what we have today. We need to have accountability and governance. And so the last one, of course, is the developers. And for those that don't know, there's a pretty funny video here. I'm going to see if I can play this. I guess it's not going to play, but there's a pretty funny video by Steve Ballmer in which he went on a huge tirade for like a few minutes, talking about the importance of developers. So this is a critical role, obviously, within any distribution application project, any computer science project. You need developers, and these projects that we're going to be building are no different. How we plan to address it within EOS Phoenix is, besides hoping to recruit developers from the local colleges and universities and hopefully make some partnerships with them. I've already been sending out some letters to folks. I haven't heard back from them at this point, but I'm just going to continue trying to make headways there. But one of the things we're looking to do is set up detailed, I wouldn't call them books, but they're quick cheat sheets in scripts, so that someone coming in, day one can get a local testnet set up, get that thing running, have a general C-Lion, developer interface section that is connected to that, and then get them set up with the demo contracts, loading those and building code, and just going through it week by week. And I'm not saying I'm an expert on this, because I'm really quite the opposite. I've already explained that a few times. But what I'm doing with it myself is I'm going through very simple examples and developing general knowledge and coming up with notes as I go along the way and sharing those with others. So that's going to be the plan. Kind of two tracks. One is this general meetup group that goes over different aspects of EOS.io. and the different features and how you view EOS.io. And the other one is more about the DAP development space, and those people who are interested in it, irrespective of their backgrounds, they can join us. And one of those special use cases would be the developer track, which we're working to get through and just develop a general, agenda for each of those meetups so make them very effective. So developers are a pretty important role. Besides that, there's obviously a need for event managers and artists. And the reason why this is important is, again, the general public doesn't know anything about EOS.io, at least here in Phoenix. Okay, I think we had, around 15 people, 20 people commit to our last meetup, and that was at launch time. And I made the statement already that if you gave, 100 EOS to people, a general person outside on the street, they would have no idea what you're giving them. And that's a problem, If we expect to develop EOS into a global recognized software solution, and we expect the DApps to also scale to mainstream, part of that is going to be events that garner interest from the general public. And we can only do that by having creative, shows and speakers and conferences maybe here in the Phoenix area. And we can, tap into some of our global talent. I mean, I'm sure people would want to connect with us, but we need to have something for them to connect with us on. And so we need your talent. If you're out there and if you're watching this video and you happen to be have these skill sets, maybe you've done events before, maybe you're an artist, please connect with us. We're looking for those people to help us, and it's also an opportunity for you to put your name on the map here. I mean, this is really just the beginning of what I think is going to be something historical, something very groundbreaking, but we can't do it without people like you. So I would say get involved if you can. Here's some examples of, what I was envisioning anyway, at some point, holding different exciting events here in Phoenix. And then we have other aspects of what I see as part of this overall strategy, and that would be the legal and local government affairs here in Arizona and Phoenix area. And the reason why this is important is because we'd want to, establish partnerships actually with our local government agencies, potentially for access for more incubation, centers to enable people to get a hold of this technology. Maybe there's opportunities for grants for people who help us with this, and maybe governments have a role in this because, again, if this is the direction, in my opinion, the answer is yes. If this is the direction the world is heading in, then the governments themselves have an interest in educating the citizens on this and how it's going to change things, how businesses can get ready for this. And so there is a need for a partnership here between Arizona and even other places around the country. But since we're in Phoenix, I'm just mentioning this, that there's a need in Arizona to have cities who are willing to partner with an incubator or a community like EOSIO Phoenix and work together on how we can enhance the education of people within the community and give them the basic tools, right, so that they can go and leverage this open source software solutions. So there is that component. There's also, legal affairs, whether between our communities and the government, and also, for the DApps that are going to be developed, there could be some needs there. So again, this is EOS.io Phoenix. I hope you guys are enjoying this content. If you find it useful, consider hitting that like button. Consider subscribing to this channel. We're probably going to do one of these at least once a week. We also host, at least on a bi-weekly basis, general meetings. We have a couple also coding get-togethers with our team. They're not necessarily formal at this time, but we are looking to formalize that as we get more resources and I start to allocate more time towards this. I'm also looking for others to help, and we have fortunately a few that have stepped up and offered some support. So really thankful for that, and but could always use more. So feel free to connect with us again on EOS Phoenix. You can also find us on our meetup group. So if you go to meetup.com and then just type in EOS Phoenix, you should be able to find us. I think we're the only meetup group here in Arizona that is covering EOS. So here's a general rough sketch of, and this is obviously going to be cleaned up and refined, but again, a lot of people just, when they think of developing a DAP, they don't consider all the aspects of maybe what all that goes into just getting to the point where you're ready to build. And what I'm looking to show here, or share with that community here, is what I've started to draft up as general steps, if you will, on what might be needed. And obviously there's a lot of things that are missing here, but this is just intended to start the discussion. And so the way this works is they're kind of like stacks of major milestone steps in basically a project initiation, okay? So I won't go through all the details, but you can see I've kind of divvied this up in 4 different areas. So your first area would be your idea, and obviously that's kind of like, well, why? Why are you doing this? What's your solution? And more importantly, any VC or anybody's going to ask, well, why do it on the blockchain? Because you could have there could be a problem out there or a need, but not all problems out there are, should be solved by the blockchain. So, contrary to what most people are saying about blockchain, in my opinion, there's just some things that, honestly, they have no basis for. They have no basis for the blockchain, right? There's no real reason to have that type of solution on the blockchain. And so for those, you don't want to obviously have, you don't want to develop them further, right? But you could also want to identify the use case scenarios. So there may be different use case scenarios, and you'd want to go through all the permutations and understand how your idea solves those, step through how the technology might work at a high level, right? From a, if you were telling this to a general person, you'd want them to understand your solution. That's really where we need to get to. We need to be able to explain the problem, explain our solution in a way that is clear and understandable to even a general person, and then explain why we're doing it on the blockchain. So why, a typical system wouldn't be suitable for it, and why our solution is 1,000 times better. That's really where we want to get to. So again, more discussions on this to follow at our meetup group, at our meetups, but I thought I'd just share it for this week. Maybe you're at work and you have an opportunity to view these videos, so I like to put this information out so it can be digested at a time that works for anybody who's viewing this content at a later date. It also allows people who are new to EOS.io, who come into Phoenix and who want to learn about this. This content is basically available to you so that we can refer you to this as a starting basis to understand general application development framework. So what makes EOS.io, or I think app development, and this is just my opinion, all this stuff is just, I want to say this, all this stuff is just content I developed. These are drafts. They're not from EOS.io. It's not affiliated with them. It's not affiliated with Block.one. So all the things you've heard so far are just things that are on my mind, things that I'm learning as I go along, things I thought I'd share with you. They're not, it's not to say that you have to do them this way. And this isn't obviously affiliated with the Swarm. I'm not really affiliated with that project anymore, so this is just, again, my own opinion solely. So But in addition to an idea initiation, you'd also have a need for governance. And again, this goes back to what I just mentioned earlier about the lessons I learned, is that governance is very important. And you'd want at the beginning of your idea to not necessarily pick the people in your team, but what you'd want to establish is who you need on your team. Like, what are your skill sets? And what are skill sets or resources you need to honestly get your project rolled out and deployed, or rolled out in a prototype mode, right? And get buy-in VCs or get the community to back you. So you're going to need to identify project role leads, and we're going to come up with general templates to help expedite this. So you can go through kind of like as a checkbox or a boilerplate. I guess boilerplate documentation is the best way I can describe how we're going to translate this PowerPoint slide deck into kind of like a deliverable for the community. So they can just go through and through check boxes or steps and processes, kind of walk them through developing their idea and getting it to market. That's really the concept here. So establishing project roles and leads is going to be critical. But again, we'll have the general framework for what you need. And then what we envision, or what I was thinking to do for sort of at least the projects I'd like to work on is actually having and this is going to sound maybe bizarro to some people, but I think it's needed, is a contract project token. And the reason why I think that's needed is because at times, the thing is, when you work with other people, it is part of this, obviously, a teamwork effort, right? So you bring certain skills, they're bringing certain skills, and everybody needs to work together to get this project hopefully implemented successfully. Now, this contract project token can, in my opinion, what we could do is we could tie it directly to a person's reputation. Now, what that's going to do is by tying it to the reputational identity, it's going to establish, who's done what in the community. Okay, if someone signs up to do a project role for an application, what you want to make sure is that you have accountability in implementing that project. What we don't want to happen is someone signs up for a project role and then for some reason they are unable to commit to fulfilling the role, the expectations of the role. So in having some type of a smart contract project token, or maybe even just a smart contract for the project, that's going to ensure that there's basically a record of accountability established for everybody on that project. The other thing it does with the token part of it, which is why I'm interested in developing that framework with others, is it gives those can tie in directly to an incentive structure for people. So as they're completing the work, as things are moving along, the tokens can be awarded to the people doing it incrementally, right? And that could tie and flow into the airdrop model for the entire community, but it would reward those that elect to do a little bit more work than what most people do. So I think this is a very interesting framework. I'd like to hear what others think. I'm going to step through this contract project token in more detail probably in one of the next videos, but I just want to give an overall understanding for at least how I'm envisioning these projects would be rolled through. Obviously, you want project rules and a voting protocol established for how you proceed through the evolution of the project. And then you'd want an incentive framework. So again, we kind of hinted at that with the token, but there actually would be like an incentive framework built into this incubator itself. And so that would automatically give a way that people who want to participate in these ideas, who have the talent or who want to develop talent, here's a way that we can ensure that you're rewarded for your efforts. And that reward would probably be through the form of the Incubator token, the Incubator project token you're a part of. So the other aspects of this would be finance. So we'd want to talk through the token type that you're interested in doing, or what's suited best for your project. Some of that goes back to the solution and how you're going to use blockchain to solve a problem. And what I mean by token type is you can have tokens that are utility only, which is probably what we're going to focus on just to keep most things kosher. There's some ways I've thought about getting around some of these issues by partnering with global folks, and that's something I want to also hint at and make some partnerships with our friends in, like, let's say South Korea or Africa or other places around the globe, because I have some thoughts on how we can help each other with that. And it could also be, potentially in the future, payment layers that are involved with the token. So there could be, an example of a utility token would be like you're, storing or your reputation, right, on this application. That could be a form of utility. Voting mechanisms on a token could be a form of utility. So they're not really used for payment. And you can have also those that maybe do both. So although there's issues, there could be issues with that. So again, we're gonna have to see how this evolves and work through them, and also work with our partners on the strategy. The other thing is obviously how you're funded, and there's different ways that, again, we can work through in doing that. We've seen some examples of, for example, we've seen the airdrop EOS DAP model, formerly all the way back from the EOSIO folks on the Ethereum network, who use that strategy to market themselves. And EOS DAC and others on EOS took it a step further in that they were actually able to derive value purely by dropping the tokens and allowing the community to establish the value. Now, we don't want to just do this willy-nilly, because we want EOS Phoenix and projects that come out of here ideally to have some type of reputation where we're known for good work and innovative solutions. So before getting to this, actually implementing this airdrop or doing those types of things, we probably would need to have this idea initiation, governance, and even some aspects of your pre-implementation worked through and given green light from many partners around the globe. I would think you'd want to do. I mean, there's nothing here to say you have to do it that way. This is just, again, just sharing my own thoughts. And then we need to talk about token liquidity. So I talked about that in the previous slides about how we could overcome that as a community. I just gave one example, but there's other ideas as well. So again, you can learn more about the specifics by helping participate in the actual physical meetups we have. This isn't intended to, substitute a lot of that. This is intended to garner your interest and hopefully encourage you to participate in them and help us with these efforts. And then the last major phase of this pre-design effort, all these steps, is what I call your pre-implementation, your pre-build-out, which is like your white paper, which discusses, pretty much takes your idea initiation in some ways, your governance and your finance, and it rolls them up into like a white paper that someone can read and get a sense for what all the efforts that were done in these first three containers, right? All those details should be in your white paper to give people an idea of what you're doing. Also missing from here, which I'm going to put in, or it would be in this pre-implementation phase, would be your roadmap. So what's your roadmap strategy to go from pre-implementation or pre-design to your requirements, your build-out, your prototype, your testing, and going to market. That would be needed. You also have your prototyping. So I already talked about that. You might even want to put that in your white paper as a visual, just to share with people how some of this works, maybe like a storyboard kind of framework, if you will. And then your core team. So at some point here, hopefully through doing these three containers, you develop a rapport and a relationship with people around you who you can trust. And a lot of that also comes back to maybe your project token or your project contract, I'm thinking. And these wouldn't necessarily just be people in EOS Phoenix. These could be people around the globe who take a liking or interest to your project. But you'd want to form your core team. And again, so this goes back purely to your community, because what people are going to start looking at, in my opinion, across the globe on these projects is who makes up your core team. And the only way to have a strong core team, or one way, and probably more appropriate for people within EOS, is those people are known for doing great work. They're known as trustworthy people. They're known as being very reliable, and they're very accountable to people. If you just hire some people off the street, not to be insulting, I mean, they may be great at what they do, but if they have no face time in the community and you put them on your core team, you're less likely to get support for your project. So that's why it's important for you, if you're interested in actually moving forward with your application, getting funding, getting support, launching your project, is very critical, in my opinion, for you to find a community. It doesn't have to be EOS Phoenix, and in fact you can create your own, but it's very critical to find a reputable community who can support you and bring on, people who are known, from a reputation standpoint as being honest, accountable, hardworking, and diligent, to the global community. That, I think, is going to be very key in a successful, even in pre-design at that point. And then, of course, we can't leave out the 2-minute elevator, 3-minute elevator pitch and slide deck. And so EOS Phoenix has a number of resources for you guys. I have, as you guys know, a green screen. I have lighting I can bring in to our Incubator office, which I know some of you guys attended this past weekend at Community. So we have, those resources available when we get there for teams to make videos. I also have a number of links and resources I've collected that go over, different websites that you can create infographics with, and just nice, efficient, clear, concise videos that could explain your idea. That's going to be essential also, just to get visibility on what it is you're building, because most people have no idea what is possible, and so it's important to communicate your concept, your token economics, why people should be excited about your idea. That's really what we want to get to. So this goes over how DAP tokens within EOS Phoenix could get value. We're not going to go over that in this meetup or presentation, but I can share more ideas about that in person. So I don't know if there's any questions for those that are online. I want to thank you guys for tuning in. I just wanted to get this out to everybody, and I want to thank everybody for the support. It's been extremely exciting. So thank you, and until next time, have a great evening. Ciao.